Hello everybody, this is Frank Norris of the Frank and Stan chat. You can see I'm in a slightly different room today. Had a problem with the router connection, so I'm sitting right next to the router in a what we call the S room, a big room. And I'm joined today by my good friend Stan Johnson. Good morning, Stan.
Good morning, morning everyone.
Yeah, you're in your little, I don't know what.
Still in the office.
Hey?
Too cold to go in the summer house.
And you can see we've got a guest. It's Paul Gerrard. Hello, Paul.
Morning. Morning, Stan.
Yeah. Paul, can you just tell those people that watch these videos who you are and what you do?
I'm Paul Gerrard. I'm campaigns and public affairs director at the Cooperative Group in Manchester. I've been there for about 4.5 years, having spent 20-something years as a Whitehall civil servant.
Enjoy it?
Love it. Never thought I'd leave government. Joined, having done a degree and a PhD. Joined government, joined Manchester Customs and Excise. Still, if people ask me what I think I am, I think I'm a excise man. I never thought I'd leave, but I did. And I'm amazed and delighted that I love my job as much as I do still. I love working for Coop, and I love the kind of things we try and do.
Brilliant. Okay, so what we'll do is the focus obviously is going to be on education, but it will flit in and out of co-op campaigning work because I know education is a big element of that. So, what's caught your eye this week, Stan?
Things get worse and worse, don't they? Yes, last night I think, finding out that the government have used emergency powers to make it now, you break the law if you don't provide online education for individual children who can't attend due to COVID. What is that about?
You've got to do it on the first day as well, you know.
We know we're not criticising and slagging off, but which numpty came up with that?
Stan, that was going to be my one as well.
If a child's off with a cold, oh, that's okay. They don't need it. But if they're off because of COVID, then on the first day, that individual child has to have lessons. And in the text I saw, not the actual law, I've not read the law in detail, but in the text I saw, it said exactly the same lessons as the rest of the class are getting. Who is going to monitor that? Who's going to say whether it's working or not? And it brought me to another thought of, if a school breaks the law, what happens?
Well, I mean, I think I do think the issue around breaking the law, this is really not quite the best ground for the government to be standing on at the moment, is it? You know, I mean, it really is a messy place for them. But the issue for me was also around the sense that these things are being sort of decided by people who don't seem to have much sort of link into what's actually happening in schools. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I tweeted something which basically encouraged parents and carers to contact their school if they felt the school had actually stepped up to the mark, you know, during this awful period. It was the most tweeted tweet I had ever sent. And I have to say 99.9% of the responses to that tweet were positive, in that people said, I can't believe what the school's done, it's been amazing. There was one man who said, I've got a child in year 9, I think there's one in year 7 or something, and they've had nothing. I really feel as though we shouldn't be making laws for the 0.1% of people. There's another way of following that up, you know. Yeah. Anyway, so Paul, anything caught your eye this week?
Probably not as important as those things. It's my fun that always catch my eye. And two things this week. One was pretty damning for me, and one was quite pleasing for me. I'm a huge fan of Big Country, Scottish band from the early 80s, and in particular Stuart Adamson, who died a number of years ago. Anyway, I got a vintage poster, right, of the first album, which is The Crossing from 1983, and I was taking it to get it framed. And my daughter, who's 17, was looking at it, and she said, Dad, I said, yeah, what's a chrome cassette? Because on the poster it says available on vinyl and chrome cassette. You know what a chrome cassette was? So that just made me feel old, very old. But then the more positive thing is my little lad who's 8. So my daughter Emma's 17, my little lad Joseph is 8. He started karate and he's loving it. He's got his orange belt and he's etc. He's going on. And I took him last night actually, and I was watching him, and the concentration on his face. He's 8. The concentration on his face is absolutely remarkable, because you think when they're 8, they're still babies, and of course they are in one sense. But watching him, I just thought, if you can capture whatever they love, and get that focus and concentration and determination on it. You know, he was walking on the side, on the edges of his feet in order to strengthen for a kick or something. I just thought, and I just remember just that image, just thought, wow, you know.
I think
those two things.
Oh,
it's interesting because
got some good news for you, Paul. Cassettes are now being considered cool again.
Okay.
There was a news podcast saying that if you had the cassette version of Oasis first tracks, they're now worth quite a lot of money.
Oh,
it's cool to own those now.
So I bought a new record player, right? Record player, and I went to my dad's. My dad's in his 70s now, and he had all my records, and I had hundreds of singles and hundreds of albums. He says to me, Dad, "We're all records." He went, "What records?" I said, "Oh yeah, no, I threw them."
Oh,
"What do you threw them?" "Oh well, they were messing up. Dad, they were under the stairs. You never go under the stairs." So now I'm going to re-buy them, and so, you know, for example, the Smiths that cost me £4 from our price in 1982 or 3 is now costing me 20 quid.
yeah.
Not only has he ruined it, but it's costing me a bloody fortune. But anyway. Yeah.
Just to pick up on the point, though, I think it's relevant about your child and the karate, is that we've got 4 grandchildren, and because of COVID, we actually only see 3 of them on a regular basis. But actually, the eldest is really into dinosaurs, wants to be a paleontologist. And it's a little bit like she's completely obsessed with it, you know, wants to learn as much as she can about that subject, wants a paleontologist kit for Christmas, you know, which is basically, I think, going to be a sharp chisel or something or other. But she's really into it, and her level of knowledge is amazing. And it just sort of makes the point, doesn't it? If you get the curriculum right, and you end up giving children stuff that they want to learn, and you're tuned into that, then actually the response you get from the children is so much stronger than actually driving a system whereby a lot of schools feel, you know, obsessed with having to teach tables in year 4 because there's a tables test at the end of year 4, or teaching phonics in year 1 because there's a phonics screening test in year 1. You know, actually just freeing that curriculum up a little bit could have a massive impact in terms of motivation for children.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, Paul, tell us a little bit about the stuff that, you know, I mean, why is the Co-op involved in education at all? I mean, are there doing what the Co-op's doing?
No, and I guess, you know, why are they involved in education? Co-ops are fundamentally about aspiration. That's what co-ops are about. And it's about people getting on. The difference is for a co-op is that you get on together. You don't get on your own. It's not an individualistic thing, it's a collective thing. And of course, therefore, you know, getting on, aspiration, social mobility, we know that the most important mechanism to do that is education. It's not a coincidence that back in 1844, when the Rochdale Pioneers were founded, and indeed earlier cooperative societies in London and Scotland, there was a big focus on education. Lots of co-op stores had reading rooms above it, and the reading rooms were above it were designed to assist those members, often working class men and women, to read and write and learn maths, because education was a way in which they could particularly be involved in the co-op and in their civic duties and obligations and responsibilities, but also it allowed them to get on. So in a sense, when you're a co-op and co-op's about collective aspiration, then education is a critical thing to do that, you know. So I think for the co-op, it's just, you can't be a co-op and have the values that we have and not think about education. Indeed, one of our principles, there's 7 principles of co-ops. They were established in 1844 as the Rochdale Principles. They've been revised a number of times since. All 3 million co-ops, there's 3 million co-ops in the world. They all have the same set of values and principles. And principle number 5 is education.
Yeah.
You know, it's a core part of being a co-op.
It's interesting. I mean, I came to all this quite sort of late in my career, but actually it's a little bit like church schools. You know, you can go into a church school and you can tell straight away that there's a sort of different feel about it. I don't know if you felt this as well, Stan, but going into co-op schools that are truly co-op have a different feel to them. You can sense a slightly different approach in what you're experiencing.
I think what I've experienced is a move towards that, and seeing a school change as a result of that. There are significant changes in the ethos of the school in a period of what, two years. So yes, I feel that, and I understand it, and I think people get it once they've been introduced to it. So it's not. Excuse me. Unlike you mentioned churches, it's not a matter of belief. It's a matter of, you know, this is a way we can work, and it works. So why not? I have seen that change, and I do think that's something that's had a very positive impact on the school.
I think when co-ops are at the best, well, I'll rephrase it. When co-ops are at the worst, they become almost like the People's Front of Judea or the Judean People's Front, and they disappear up their own whatever. I think when co-ops are at the best is when they are fundamentally practical and pragmatic, and as you said, Stan, it works. Let's do it like that. You know, I think that's where co-ops work best, whether it's in an education setting or it's in business or it's in charity or whatever it may be.
It's interesting though that, I mean, the first time I saw you, Paul, was when you were on television. I heard that you joined the co-op, and you were on television because of modern slavery. I think you were on a Sunday morning programme. You were on the front row, and I thought, I seem to remember him from The Office, and not The Office programme, but the co-op office. That was a campaign, wasn't it, that actually, in effect, was right to do, but actually it was used by the co-op schools to actually sort of, you know, develop a better understanding of this sort of unfairness.
Yeah, and I mean,
campaigning can actually roll into the curriculum.
Yeah, and I think one of the great strengths of a co-op, and I think, you know, the co-op I work for, which is the cooperative group, is, you know, had its problems a few years ago, very well documented, very high profile problems, and we've been trying to rebuild our cooperative since that. And part of that is about rebuilding the business, you know, and people will see the different look and feel of our shops now, the way our insurance products work differently, etc. But the other bit is about rebuilding the campaigning heart of the co-op, because when a co-op is really effective and really successful, it campaigns on issues that matter to its members. It might not be commercial issues. Slavery was not a commercial issue. It was an issue that mattered to our members. And I think what's interesting about slavery, you know, we're all in Manchester or drawn to Manchester, either born or drawn, as Longfellow said in that poem. And if you go into Deansgate, opposite the John Rylands, there's a square called Lincoln Square, and in the middle of Lincoln Square is a statue to Abraham Lincoln. It's an odd thing to have in the centre of Manchester, or any northern town, to be honest with you, or any town in England, really. But the reason it's there is that back in 1863, the working men and women of Manchester stood in solidarity with Lincoln in his fight against slavery. And that's a very nice thing to do. But Lincoln wrote back to them saying it was an act of heroism. And the reason he said that is one of the things Lincoln was doing to win the Civil War and defeat the Confederacy and defeat slavery was a blockade of the southern Confederate ports. And of course, their biggest export was cotton. Right. Manchester was cotton monopolis. As a result of what Lincoln was doing, there was the Lancashire cotton famine. So when those working men and women of Manchester wrote to Lincoln to say, carry on fighting slavery, they knew full well that cotton blockade was putting them out of work, and it was the first humanitarian disaster in industrial age. And the link here is the people who organised the working men and women of Manchester to write to Lincoln to say carry on at a meeting at the Free Trade Hall on Peter Street. The people who organised it were the founders of the Cooperative Wholesale Society. And because cooperatives are about equality, they're about equity, and they're about solidarity, standing in solidarity with those. And therefore, what my cooperative forebears did in 1863 we did again in 2016, 2017, 2018, because it's a cooperative thing to do, to stand in solidarity with those who are being treated unfairly and badly. And slavery, the work I did on slavery and still do, is the most shocking thing I've ever seen in my professional career.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting when we've spoken before, Stan, about how easy it is to understand equality, but how difficult it is for some people to get their head around equity. And actually, that word equity, you don't hear too many politicians using the term equity. They often talk about equality. Because equity is actually damn hard, because it actually does require you to do things very differently. You know, not
and to treat different people differently.
Differently, yes.
Which is hard to do.
Yeah.
It's much easier to say we're treating everybody the same and appear that that's somehow fair.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, we spoke a little bit, just to remind people, we spoke about some work I've been trying to do with in the Northern Powerhouse Fund, pupil premium, because at the moment, every child who's on pupil premium, regardless of how long they're claiming free school meals, gets exactly the same. So a child who's been on free school meals for their entire school life, the school gets exactly the same financial support for that child as if another child who's been on it for a very short period of time but is still eligible for pupil premium. So in a way, the level of deprivation or support that's required for a child belonging to a family that's had long-term disadvantage is significantly different, you know, to those that have had a fleeting, you know, I'm pleased to say, a fleeting encounter with it. And I think that equity element is something which I think, you know, politicians have found very difficult to get, well, to actually drive change in that way. It's very easy to say, well, we've got the pupil premium and everybody's going to have exactly the same. No one's going to beat about that. But actually to say, well, actually there should be a sort of different way of doing this, and it should be more heavily weighted towards those who have had long-term disadvantage. And that would have a massive impact on some of the schools that the Co-op Academies Trust supports in the north, which are in largely very deprived communities, where actually some of the families are long-term disadvantaged. I mean, another thing, Paul, that we sort of talk about is, in a sense, this is the same thing, I think, is the way that the Co-op group supported some of the families during the lockdown and actually provided vouchers for those families. I think there was a subsidy. I think they were paying more than the actual government scheme. There's actually a bit of a story behind this, isn't there? That it's not as, it's a good story, but it's got a little bit of a nasty taste in the mouth. I don't want you to get into trouble for saying what you're going to say, so be careful, you know.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, we support the Cooperative Academies Trust, obviously, and way back in March when the coronavirus first started, we recognised that with the Easter summer holidays coming up and people being in what was then a national lockdown, many families who were reliant on free school meals were going to be in some difficulty. And so, you know, again, this comes down to values. It comes down to values of equity and equality and solidarity again. And it's about, okay, so how can we support them? So we, even before the government decided to do anything, we were already clear that we were going to provide vouchers to those families who were reliant on free school meals. And we were going to top it up to beyond the £15 that would normally be given for a week to £20. And we're pleased we did that. And of course, that then took off over the summer through Marcus Rashford.
Is he one of the greatest cooperators of the year?
Well, I think, you know, I've been privileged enough to help in a very, very small way some of the things that Marcus has done, but, you know, I can take absolutely no credit for anything Marcus has done. I think he's a remarkable young man. I think for a 22-year-old lad who is fundamentally a bloody good footballer, to have such a instinct and such a sense of what is right, I think he's remarkable. It's absolute credit to our city and our country. I also think, and I love, in many ways, Marcus's story is the story of his mother. And I think what I always think when I hear Marcus speak is that is the power of a mother's love, because, you know, his mother never gave up and never wanted anything but everything she could give for her kids. And I think Marcus is a remarkable young man. I don't think he's finished.
No, and I think
he launched his task force in September. He's very, very determined to continue to be a voice for his community. And I think
it's great. It's great that he hasn't lost sight. He hasn't lost touch, has he?
No.
I think connect with his community, the community he grew up in. He's still able to understand those pressures.
Yeah, and I think he's beginning to get a bit of stick on social media now from players. People saying concentrate on your football. Well, he's played 3 games this season, scored two goals, and he's still our biggest threat. So I'm quite happy for him to carry on doing what he's doing. But I think what he's shown is, and I think you're absolutely right in the cooperation piece. I'm not sure Marcus would term it like that, but actually what he's doing and what he's done with the task force is he's trying to get people to come together so nobody gets left behind. The heart of a co-op, and the reason we did what we did in March and have supported Marcus throughout his campaign, and this is us supporting Marcus, is in a co-op, you come together, no one gets left behind. And what was happening in the Easter and in the summer is people were being left behind. And that isn't right. And if you believe in the power of cooperation, and I do, then it's fine to talk about it, and then you got to do something. I think we were fortunate that Marcus did what he did. I mean, I worked in government for 20 years. I wouldn't have expected a 22-year-old young lad from Wythenshawe, who happens to play for United, to be able to force a U-turn in government within 48 hours. I was going to our school in Blakely to do an interview for Sky. And as I walked in to do the interview for Sky saying why the government should back Marcus's campaign, I got a phone call from my boss, John Churchill, saying, by the way, Paul, before you do the interview, they've just made the U-turn. I went, what? Said, yeah, I'm looking at it on Sky. So as I walked in, I met the Sky reporter and said, you do know they've just made the U-turn? And she went, what? Oh, God. I spent all day filming this. There's not a story anymore. I went, okay.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I think it is a credit to the co-op that they've stepped up to support those families. But actually, I think it goes so deep. The level of the levelling up agenda is one that is not going to be. It's a very nice phrase, but actually, I think the COVID issue has made it very clear where the divide is, and I think we're in a very high risk area at the moment with regard to infections, and I think some of that is related to to long-term disadvantage. I'm pleased in some respects that Marcus Rashford and others, some good that's come out of this is that for the first time, we're starting to see some of the poorer end of society actually being shown on television, not as wasters or low lifes, but actually they've been, some of them have been served a pretty poor deal over time, and it's great to see the co-op stepping up to try and support them.
And I think, Stan mentioned it before in relation to equity. I mean, when I was in the civil service, I ran taxpayers and child benefit for about 6.5 years, so that was delivering about £40 billion worth of government support to 6 million families. And what really struck me, because sometimes things went wrong in that system. I was sort of there after the initial problems when it was beginning to stabilise, but even so, things went wrong. And I remember talking to a lady who was making a complaint, and she had 3 different jobs. Tax credits was critical. She had an overpayment, and she could take me through literally to the penny every single expenditure she had in that week, and the fact that if she was forced to repay at £3 a week, she was going to be in debt and going to be in increasing debt. And what that really taught me was the bluntness of government policy, because actually she was the kind of person that the government, any government, would absolutely want to herald and say, absolutely, she was working her socks off, she was giving her kid the best start in life, she was absolute star. But the government's policy was actually going to force her to do the things they didn't want to do. She was going to have to stop work in one of those jobs. And I think that equity point and the ability of government to just think through how it plays out in different scenarios rather than a very clumsy one-size-fits-all. I really learned that in government.
that's a really good way that I can bring this discussion to a close, because that goes back actually to the point Stan made at the beginning about the beliefs of government policy and the use of a law now to affect a school. I don't know how many schools, must be a very, very small number, very, very few in number, who actually have not provided home learning for children, and actually most schools are trying to do that as quickly as they possibly can, because they have the child at the heart of all of this. Okay, well, thank you, Paul. It's funny how these minutes just roll past. So thank you, Stan. And yeah, I think next week, Stan, I think it's you and me on our own, and then we have a series of weeks where we have guests, and we're pleased to announce, Stan, you put off a coup this week, haven't you?
Let's confirm it. I'm going to send him an email back this week, because he's definitely do it. Absolutely said he'll do it, but just to work out a day and the logistics of how we communicate with Canada and.
Yeah. So, without giving a name, we have an eminent educational speaker, researcher, and leadership guru who's very well known in the education sector, going to join us for one of these. So I've ordered the latest book as well, Stan. So I will have read the interview. Anyway,
yeah, I haven't got his latest book here, but I'm just.
Yeah, that's the. I've got that one as well.
Got his other stuff here.
So it's a book that I would advise any prospective head teacher to get their head around that reading. Okay, well, thank you both very much, and we'll see our viewers next week, just Stan and myself. And thank you, Paul, for joining us this week.
Pleasure.